3 days after they buried Judge Yancey Ellsworth, his widow still had not opened the embroidery frame. She had placed it on top of the buffet cabinet in the dining room with the dark oak hoop facing up and the raw linen folded beneath. And at 5:30 in the afternoon, she had run her index finger along the rim of the hoop the way she had done every evening since 1972. 54 years of that. The finger knew the grain of the oak better than it had ever known the face of her husband. It knew where the wood was smoother near the joint and where the grain roughened slightly toward the clasp. It knew the temperature of the rim in January versus May, the way the varnish had worn thin on the left side from decades of the same gesture made by the same hand at the same hour. The finger knew the hoop the way a blind woman knows a door frame, completely, without thinking, without needing to. But the linen had not been unfolded. There was no new thread. There was no new order. And for the first time in half a century, there was no tablecloth commission for anyone. It was May 19th, 2026. Desi Belcher Ellsworth, whom everyone in Silver Ridge, Virginia had called Des since she was 6 years old, was 73. And the total sum of what she had left in her bank account at Blue Ridge Federal was $312.40. She lived on Maple Hill Road in the Hospital District in a 2-story house with a bluestone facade that her husband had inherited from his mother in 1989. The house sat on the cobblestone slope that led up to the old silver mine. In the mornings, you could hear the shift change siren from the new mine down at the other end of town in the valley where the trees thinned out and the road straightened toward Roanoke. In the afternoons, you could hear the bell from Assumption Church up on the hill. Silver Ridge, Virginia in May. It smells like cold damp with a trace of old coal. And Des had known that smell with her body since she was 19 years old when she moved into this house as a bride. But the house was no longer hers. The house had been mortgaged to the last cent. Her husband had mortgaged it in 2024 without telling her, mortgaged it to Blue Ridge Federal with a lien that covered 100% of the appraised value. She had found out on January 8th, 2026, exactly 1 month after the funeral, when the first letter from the bank arrived, saying the monthly payments had been overdue since November. That was January. In February, the letter from the IRS came. In March, the letter from the accounting firm that her husband had hired to manage what little was left of his law practice arrived. The firm, it turned out, was one of the principal creditors. In April, the letter from Furman Osborne, attorney and executor of the will, arrived. It invited her to his office in Richmond, Virginia on Tuesday, May 19th at 11 in the morning to receive, and this was the exact word, the residual file of Judge Yancey Ellsworth, together with documents that were not subject to lien or liquidation proceedings. Residual. That is what the letter said. Des had read the word 3 times that April afternoon, sitting in the same dining room chair, her index finger on the rim of the oak hoop, her small hazel eyes fixed on the word printed in Times New Roman size 12. Residual. What is left over? What could not be collected? What nobody wanted. 54 years of marriage had taught her not to cry over words printed on paper. But what she thought, and this needs to be said here because it matters later what she thought that afternoon while staring at the word residual, was something cold and clear. She thought maybe what remains is what had value from the beginning, and maybe that is exactly why it remained. She did not say this to anyone. Not to anyone. Not to the daughters either. Tressa, the older one, had been living in Savannah since 2008. With a veterinarian husband and 3 teenage children. She called every other Sunday with a voice that said, "When is your next doctor's appointment, Mom?" Vashti, the younger one, had been living in Edinburgh since 2012, teaching comparative literature at a private university, married to a Scottish philologist. She sent WhatsApp messages on Wednesdays. Good morning. Hope you're well. Kiss. Both of them knew their father had died. Both had come to the funeral. Both had left on the third day. Neither of them knew about the mortgage. Neither of them had asked about money, and Des had not mentioned money because to ask them would have been to tell them that their father had left them with nothing. And their father, in the minds of both daughters, was still Judge Yancey Ellsworth of the law office on Allende Street. A man of his word, a straight man, a small-town professional who did everything right. To tell them that their father had left them with nothing would have been to kill him again. And once per husband is enough. There was also Nestor, the middle child, the son. He had died of acute leukemia in April of 2003, 18 years old, after 4 months in the hospital in Roanoke. Des did not say his name aloud that afternoon. She only thought 3 children, 2 still living, one in a place where no one can call. She remembered sitting there in the dining room with her finger on the oak rim the night Nestor died. The hospital hallway in Roanoke, the plastic chairs, the fluorescent lights that buzzed at a frequency no one else seemed to hear. Yancey had sat on one of those plastic chairs with both hands on his knees, not crying, not speaking. Des had finished the edging on the last tablecloth for the Patterson family in the waiting room, stitching by hand, because her hands needed to be doing something, anything that had a pattern and an endpoint. When the doctor came out, Yancey stood, shook his hand, said, "Thank you, doctor," then turned to Des. "Let's go home." No embrace, no touch. He drove 40 minutes back to Silver Ridge in silence. That was the only time in 54 years that Des had suspected her husband could not feel things. But she had pushed the suspicion away because 54 years of marriage had taught her that small-town men cry differently. Now sitting alone. She was not sure of that anymore. At 5:30 on the afternoon of May 19th, then she still had not opened the frame. She had the manila envelope from the residual file on the table tied with a thick yellow rubber band. Furman Osborne had handed it to her that morning in his office on Gray Street in Richmond in a legal-size manila envelope with the words, "Stanhope 2026 Residual," written in black marker in the upper right corner. Furman Osborne was a man of 68 with a face of old tiredness, a light gray suit, and hands that trembled slightly when he signed the acknowledgments. He had received her with respect. He had called her Mrs. Ellsworth. He had called her Des. He had said several times during the hour and 20 minutes the meeting lasted that he had worked with Judge Ellsworth since 1984, that they had been classmates at Washington and Lee, that he was very sorry that the practice of law sometimes overwhelmed everyone. That was the phrase he used. The practice of law sometimes overwhelmed everyone. Des had nodded. She had not spoken much. She had not asked for explanations. At 73, a woman already knows that explanations from partners about what the husband did are a lot like explanations from sisters-in-law about what the mother-in-law said. They are always versions that leave the speaker looking better than they look at the beginning. Explanations in those cases serve to settle the conscience of the one telling, not to inform the one listening. And she had learned that without anyone teaching her. She had learned it embroidering. When a woman embroiders tablecloths for 46 years, she learns to listen without answering. The embroidery is done with the head tilted and the ears clean. Everything else gets filtered. She took the envelope, signed the acknowledgement, left the office at 12:35, took the Greyhound from the downtown terminal at 1:20 headed for Roanoke, transferred to the small green shuttle bus that climbed the mountain road towards Silver Ridge, and arrived at the general store on Main Street at 4:50 in the afternoon. She walked up the cobblestone slope, slowly holding the envelope against the left side of her gray wool shawl, and arrived at the house at 5:18. She took off her shoes in the hallway, put the envelope on the dining room table, made weak coffee in a small pot, and at 5:30 ran her finger along the rim of the dark oak hoop without thinking about anything, as she had done on 54 years of May afternoons. 5 minutes. That was all the ritual lasted that evening. Then she sat in front of the manila envelope and looked at it for a longer while. She did not open it yet. The light of May in Silver Ridge at 5:30 enters through the windows that face the back garden with an old yellow color like aged paper, and it rests on things without warming them. The light rested on the envelope and on the embroidery frame and on the hands of Des Ellsworth, which lay flat on the small checkered tablecloth, green and white, with long fingers crossed by prominent veins. Anyone who saw them would know they were the hands of an old embroiderer. A single black streak remained at her right temple. The rest of her hair was completely white, pulled back in a tight, low bun. Here, before going further, something needs to be said. The widows of small-town professional men tend to inherit two things: debts and silences, almost always in that order. What is known in the small towns of the Blue Ridge and the Appalachian Valleys, and the widows know this better than anyone, although nobody asks them, is that a professional man of the provinces builds his entire life a facade of financial respectability that is held up by small, invisible loans, favors collected late, and the dignity of the wife who sews and embroiders and prepares the dinners for the visiting attorneys without ever asking where the money for the banquet comes from. That wife, when she becomes a widow, discovers the complete machinery in a matter of months. What took 4 decades to build comes apart in 4 certified letters. Des had received 4 certified letters between January and April, and now at 5:30 on May 19th, she had a yellow manila envelope on the table, which was the fifth. The fifth, and according to Furman Osborne, the last one. What remains? The residual. She opened the envelope. Inside, clipped together with a small metal clip in the upper left corner, were 8 items. She counted them. She always counted. 46 years of filing folders in her husband's law office had left her with the habit of counting everything that came out of an envelope before reading it. There were 8 things. A cover letter signed by Furman Osborne. 3 receipts for overdue public utility payments that Des herself had already paid between February and April. A small red notebook with a worn spine containing pencil notes in her husband's handwriting dated from 1994 to 2006, which appeared to be office accounts. A folded document on old government letterhead from 1987, a case file receipt from her husband's law office for a Native American community in the Blue Ridge foothills. Case closed 40 years ago. And 2 more things. The last 2 things were different. The last 2 things did not fit. The first was a public deed. A notarized public deed on bonded paper bound with cord and bearing the fire stamp of Public Notary Number 15 of the County of Highland, dated March 27, 2007, 19 years ago. The deed stated on the first page adjudication by testamentary succession, and on the second page, after the background section, it stated clearly in print, size 12, the adjudicatee Judge Yancey Ellsworth receives the property located at 14 Miners Row, Silver Ridge, Virginia, known as Ogilvie House or Ogilvie Manor, with a construction area of 23,000 square feet and a lot of 51,000 square feet free of lien and of any testamentary encumbrance in fulfillment of the last will and testament of the late Iverson Ogilvie, maternal uncle of the adjudicatee, executed in the city of Roanoke on June 18, 1992. Des read it once. She read it again. She read it a third time, and on the third time she became very still. She did not move. Her hands did not raise her head, did not breathe differently. Large things when they arrived to a woman of 73 at 5:35 in the afternoon, sitting in front of a table with a green and white checkered tablecloth are not received with a scream. They are received with stillness, with the stillness of the body. The body understands before the mind does, and it goes still so as not to interfere with the understanding. The second thing that did not fit was beneath the deed. It was an envelope. An envelope made of onion skin paper, old cream color, sealed with dark red wax. The wax bore a small impressed seal, a crest with the letters I and O crossed. The envelope was addressed in faded sepia ink in careful old handwriting, done with a fountain pen to these exact words, "To whoever inherits this house." There was no return address. It was sealed. Des held it with both hands, ran her thumb over the wax. The wax was hard intact without cracks, without ever having been opened. She estimated the age of the envelope by the color of the paper and the firmness of the wax. It was old. It was from before 2007. It was, and here Des narrowed her small hazel eyes, possibly from when Uncle Iverson wrote his will in 1992 or even earlier. The envelope had been given to Judge Ellsworth as part of the succession in 2007. Judge Ellsworth had never opened it. The envelope had been sealed inside her husband's file for 19 years, and the wax had not been touched. 19 years. Her husband had received a house, a large house, a manor of more than 23,000 square feet in Silver Ridge, in March of 2007, and he had never told her. Not a word. In 19 years. In 19 years of Sunday dinners, of trips to Roanoke, of 4th of July, celebrations of the daughters' birthdays, of Christmases without Nestor, the middle child, dead of leukemia in April 2003, 18 after 4 months of hospital before that. In all those 19 years, never a word. Her mind began doing arithmetic while her hand held the envelope. March of 2007. Nestor had been dead 4 years. Tressa had just left for Savannah with the veterinarian. Vashti was finishing her master's at the University of Virginia and still living in Silver Ridge. Her husband's law practice was at its peak with 4 associates, a secretary, and 2 important corporate clients from Roanoke. The house on Maple Hill was freshly painted. The large 14-seat tablecloth for the Aguirre family was half finished. Her husband had said one morning in March of 2007, Des remembered now because the mind, when given the right piece of data, retrieves what had been filed away in the back room. He had said while tying his shoes by the front door, going to Roanoke, old succession on my mother's side, small matter, 3 days. And he had gone for 3 days. He came back on Friday afternoon with a bunch of white gladiolas for her and a box of apple butter from the general store. And never again. Never again. 19 years. Des set the envelope on the table. She placed it to the left of the embroidery frame. To the right of the frame was the deed. To the left was the sealed envelope. And between them, between the 2 things her husband had hidden from her for 19 years, sat the dark oak hoop with the raw linen folded beneath, without new thread, without an order, without anyone to embroider for. The old yellow light of 6 o'clock rested on all 3 things, and for the first time in 5 months, Des Ellsworth spoke aloud inside her own house a complete sentence. Silver Ridge is 45 minutes away. That is what she said. To no one. To the empty dining room. To the embroidery frame. To the walls papered in faded beige damask that her husband had hung in 1991. She decided not to open the sealed envelope. The wax had been intact for 19 years, and the address was explicit. To whoever inherits this house. Des had not inherited the house yet. The deed was in Judge Ellsworth's name. For her to inherit, the executor had to complete the probate transfer to the widow as universal heir according to her husband's will, which had been in process since January. That would take perhaps 2 more months. Until then, she was not the heir. Until then, the envelope was not for her. She thought this, she decided this, and she did it deliberately because Des Ellsworth, at 73, after 46 years of filing folders in her husband's office and 5 months of receiving certified letters that stripped away her life one piece at a time, knew something worth stating here. Things sealed for a long time when opened before their hour answer with disorder. And she did not need more disorder. She already had $312 in the bank and a house mortgage to the last cent and 2 daughters on different continents who did not know and a son dead 23 years. What she needed was order. The envelope would open when she was legally whoever inherits this house, not before. But before that, she had to go see the house. She decided this that same night. But before she could take the small green shuttle bus up to Silver Ridge, something else happened first. At 7:40 in the evening, while Des was sitting in the dining room with her weak coffee gone cold and the manila envelope still on the table, she heard a truck pull up outside. A heavy door slammed, footsteps on the cobblestone, then a knock. She opened the front door. Kinsey Ellsworth, her husband's younger brother, 65 years old, stood on her doorstep. He ran a real estate agency in Roanoke. He had the same jawline as Yancey, the same way of standing with his feet slightly apart and his hands in his pockets, his head tilted a fraction to the right. But the eyes were different. Yancey's eyes had been cold because they held secrets. Kinsey's eyes were cold because they were calculating. He stepped inside without waiting to be invited. He looked around the dining room, the faded damask wallpaper, the old dining table, the embroidery frame on the buffet cabinet. Then he spoke. Des Furman called me, says there is another property in Yancey's estate. I know the place. Ogilvy House. Yancey told me about it back in 2010. Said he would leave me the land to develop. Des stood in the middle of the dining room, her right hand holding the edge of the buffet cabinet. Kinsey continued, said the place was worth $2 million easy if you sold the land. The Blue Ridge real estate market was climbing. He had buyers. He proposed a partnership. He would handle the real estate side. Des could keep whatever was inside the house if she wanted. Des watched him speak. She watched his mouth move and his hands gesture, and his eyes scan the room the way real estate men scan rooms, measuring square footage in their heads, calculating what could be torn out and what could be sold. She said one thing, Kinsey, I have not inherited anything yet. When I do, I will make my own decisions. You can go now. Kinsey did not get angry. He smiled the way real estate men smile when a client is not ready yet. A patient smile, a smile that said, I will wait. No rush, D's, but don't wait too long. Old houses rot fast. He walked toward the door, stopped, turned back. Yancey always said you didn't understand property matters. I hope he was wrong, and he left. Des stood alone in the dining room. Her right hand was still on the edge of the buffet cabinet. Her left hand, and this is the first time this had happened in 54 years, reached out and touched the embroidery frame on the cabinet and pushed it. The frame fell off the cabinet, hit the hardwood floor. The sound of oak against oak. It did not break. Old oak does not break easily, but it fell. Des looked at the frame on the floor and did not pick it up. She left it there all night. The next morning, she picked it up, placed it back on the cabinet hoop facing up. But something had changed. She had let the frame fall. She who had never dropped anything in 54 years of embroidering, not a single stitch missed, not a single hoop displaced, had pushed the frame off the cabinet with her own hand. The next day she needed money. The bus ticket was $12 round trip. That was not the problem. The problem was that her attorney, Bryn Honecker, a young lawyer who had agreed to defer her fees until after the estate settled, had told her that to enter a property whose probate transfer was in progress, it was advisable to go accompanied by a civil surveyor who could provide an affidavit of presence, just to prevent anyone from later claiming she had entered without legal standing. The surveyor charged $1,350, nearly half a month of food. Day did not have it. She borrowed the money from Moselle Yates, the only friend she had left in Silver Ridge, after 5 months of widowhood. Moselle was 81. She had been a widow for 18 years. She lived alone in a small house near the English Miners Cemetery with 3 cats. The 2 of them had known each other since 1969, when Daisy's mother and Moselle's mother sold bread on the same block at the Saturday market. Moselle listened to the request without looking up from the crocheting she was doing in Afghan for a great-granddaughter in Norfolk and said after a while, "What do you want to go see, Des?" "A property that seems to have been Yancey's, that I didn't know about." Moselle crocheted 3 more stitches. "And if it's nothing, I come back the same day. And if it's something," Des thought about the answer, thought carefully, "if it's something I don't know." Moselle crocheted 3 more stitches and said without looking up, "I'll lend you the $13.50. Pay me back when you can. If you never can, then never. And don't say anything, Des. I never could stomach Yancey, you know that." Then Moselle said something else, something Des had not expected. "Des Yancey came by my house once, in 2019. After Vanita Barnett died, the wife of that caretaker of his, whatever his name is, came asking if I knew the caretaker. I said no. He left. But I remember his face. It was the face of a man checking whether a secret was still sealed." Des heard this, said nothing, but the detail lodged itself in her mind and stayed there. Moselle finished the row and said, "Widows of men like that need company. When my turn comes, God willing it has passed already, but who knows, someone will walk with me. That is the economy of old women." Des received the bills, kissed Moselle's forehead, went home. That night she slept badly. The bluestone houses of Silver Ridge are cold inside in May, even when the day has been warm. The heating had been off since February because the propane had run out and she had not ordered more. She slept with 2 blankets and an old synthetic sheepskin comforter and still felt the cold in her feet. That night she heard the distant shift change siren from the new mine 3 times. Once at 1, again at 4, again at 6, and twice she heard the barking of a dog that belonged to no one on the slope below. What you hear in a mortgaged house at night when an older woman is lying alone with a small decision made and a sealed envelope unopened on the dining room table is not the same as what you hear in an ordinary house. You hear things differently. You hear the floorboards upstairs. You hear the pendulum clock in the husband's dining room, which she had not wound since December 8th, and which at some point in the small hours briefly sounded one final small chime from a last bit of tension in the spring that should not have been there. Des woke fully at 5:18, got up, made coffee in the small kitchen, weak with a little cinnamon, ate a plain biscuit. She dressed in her gray wool shawl, her long black wool skirt, her low-heeled leather shoes worn smooth, and a beige sweater that Vashti had knitted for her in 1999 when Vashti was still living in Silver Ridge and turning 14. She sat in the dining room with her coffee and looked at the embroidery frame she had placed back on the cabinet that morning. She looked at it for a long time. Then she opened the buffet drawer, took out a spool of thread, the last one ivory white, and placed it next to the frame. She did not open it. She did not thread a needle. She just placed it beside the hoop. like placing a promise that she would return to it, that the thread would run between her fingers again when the time came. Then she put on her shawl, picked up the manila envelope, and walked out the front door into the early morning light of Silver Ridge, Virginia, where the cobblestone slope was still damp from the night fog and the shift change siren from the new mine had not yet sounded, and began walking down toward Main Street to catch the bus. The bus dropped her at the bottom of Miners Row at 11:07 on a Thursday morning in June, and the first thing Des noticed was not the house but the air. It was different from Silver Ridge air by a full season. Down in the valley where she lived, May had barely finished. Up here, at 2,200 feet, June had already brought the deep green dampness of the old-growth Appalachian forest, a wetness that did not fall from the sky, but rose from the ground from roots and moss and 100 years of leaf rot under hemlock and red oak canopy. The air had weight. It pressed against the skin of her forearms where her shawl did not cover, and it carried a scent she had not smelled in decades, the mineral sweetness of bluestone quarry dust mixed with living wood. She had not been this high on the mountain since 1968, since she was 15 years old, since the day her father, Hobart Belcher, a silver mine blaster, was killed in the shaft explosion that took 4 men and left a hole in the hillside that you could still see from the county road if you knew where to look. The house stood at the top of the street, set against the ridge with 3 visible stories and a 4th suggested by twin chimneys rising above the roofline. The facade was 52 feet of hand-cut bluestone gray with a blue undertone in the morning light, laid in courses so precise they looked machined until you got close enough to see the chisel marks. The second-story windows were tall, framed in carved stone with leaf and vine reliefs fronted by wrought iron balconies curved into ivy patterns. The main gate was 2 panels of wrought iron, each 8 feet high with a small crest forged at eye level. The letters I and O crossed. The same crest as the wax on the envelope. Des touched the brass knocker, a closed fist the size of a grown man's hand with a thick ring hanging from the left panel. The brass was cold and clean, no verdigris. Someone was polishing it. She knocked 3 times. Inside footsteps, boot steps. Someone who knew exactly how many stairs there were and where the floorboards creaked and where they held silent. Steps descending a stone staircase, then a wooden one, then crossing a covered courtyard, then landing on glazed clay tile, then approaching the gate. Nearly a full minute passed. Des did not count the steps consciously, but her body registered the distance. The house was large. The gate opened. Dorwin Barnett stood on the other side, 67 years old, medium height, a worn brown felt hat, blue and white plaid shirt, an old denim vest with multiple pockets, faded jeans, unpolished miner's boots. Large hands with nails clipped, flush, and knuckles swollen from arthritis. A thick salt and pepper mustache. Eyes the color of light brown honey with deep crow's feet at the corners. Behind him, a mixed breed dog, the color of cinnamon ears, up calm, watching her without barking. "Good morning, ma'am." "Good morning. How can I help you?" Des opened the manila envelope, took out the first page of the deed, unfolded it, and held it up with both hands at his chest height without handing it over. "I have come to see the house." Dorwin looked at the document. He looked at the notary seal at the date. Then he looked at her. He looked at all of her slowly without hurry, the way a man who has been a caretaker his entire working life looks at a newcomer because the eyes are the first instrument of evaluation. He looked at the shawl, at the beige sweater, at the hands, at the hazel eyes, at the single black streak at her right temple. Then he said, without smiling but without severity, "Come in, ma'am." He stepped aside. Des entered. The first thing she heard before seeing anything, before smelling anything, before touching anything, was the echo of her own footsteps on the herringbone pattern of glazed clay tile returned by 13-foot walls of cut bluestone multiplied by a barrel vault ceiling of exposed brick sent back down the corridor that opened at its far end onto the main courtyard. Her steps sounded like 3 steps each, small steps of an older woman in low heels, but the house returned them as large steps. The house received them and multiplied them and gave them back. This was a house that listened. She thought this at the 6th second after entering, and she stood still in the entrance hall, hearing the echo of her own steps dissolve into silence. Dorwin closed the gate behind her without a sound. "If you like, I can show you everything, ma'am. Or if you prefer, I can leave you to yourself and stay out of the way. However you want it." "Show me." "Yes, ma'am." The entrance hall opened into a corridor of barrel vault ceiling, carved stone walls, herringbone glazed tile. At the end, a finer interior wrought iron gate with the same IO crest separated the corridor from the main courtyard. Dorwin opened it. The courtyard was 46 feet by 36. A 3-tiered bluestone fountain at the center with a carved colonial cherub on the upper spout. The fountain was dry but clean. 9 large clay pots surrounded it, purple bougainvillea, red geraniums, a small ficus, 2 lemon trees at opposing corners. 4 covered arcades formed the perimeter. 8 arches per side, 32 arches total with carved stone columns and simple Doric capitals. Above the arcades, stone friezes depicted grapevines, wheat sheaves, grape clusters. The arcade ceilings were dark cedar beams with carved joinery. Des stood at the center of the courtyard beside the dry fountain and looked up at the squad. The courtyard was open to the sky, built so that light would fall straight down at noon and at an angle at all other hours. At 11:14, the June light entered from the east side at about 60 degrees, illuminating exactly 4 of the 8 western arches and leaving the other 4 in shadow. The light carried the pale yellow of the old-growth forest, filtered through the high moisture that rose from the hemlocks on Razorback Ridge in the mornings. "How long since Judge Ellsworth came here, Mr. Barnett?" The question came out of her without planning. Dorwin removed his hat, held it with both hands at his chest and thought. He thought for a long time. "The last time was March 2007, ma'am. When he took the succession, came 3 days. First day with the notary and the executor. Second day alone. Third day he left. Didn't come back." "Never?" "No, ma'am. 19 years. 19 years, ma'am. I've been taking care of this house for 33. 13 with Mr. Ogilvy before he died. 20 after. My husband paid you." "Yes, ma'am. Every month, first of the month, wire transfer Blue Ridge Federal. $2,300 a month with inflation adjustments every 2 years. Last deposit was December 1st, 2025. 1 week before he died. 1 week before. January he missed because he was already sick, I was told. But until December 1st, never missed once." Des kept looking at the sky above the courtyard. "And what did the two of you talk about in March of 2007, Mr. Barnett, if you remember?" Dorwin took a moment, then said, "About the house, ma'am. Nothing but the house. Mr. Ogilvy had left a memorandum with maintenance instructions. The judge read it through with me, told me the instructions were to be followed to the letter, that the house was not to be sold, not rented, not modified, kept clean, aired out courtyard, watered lemon trees, pruned books free of dust, rooms closed. He would pay for everything, and I was not to tell anyone the house existed. If anyone asked, I was the caretaker of an old Ogilvy family place tied up in litigation. Those were his words, and that is what I did, ma'am." He paused. "For 19 years, not a soul, not even my wife. Mr. Barnett, are you married?" "I was, ma'am. My wife's name was Vanita Barnett. She died in 2018. She was 64. diabetes poorly controlled. We were married 41 years, and I never told her this house existed. That weighs on a man, ma'am. I won't lie to you about that, but the judge asked me. Des nodded. She said nothing for a while. Then she asked Dorwin to show her the library first. The library occupied the entire second floor of the West Wing, a single room 78 feet long by 36 wide with a cedar beam ceiling at 20 feet. The walls were blue stone clad in carved cedar paneling up to 14 feet, and continuous cedar bookshelves ran along all four walls from floor to ceiling. A wrought iron rolling ladder on a circular rail traveled the perimeter. The floor was waxed walnut. At the center, a 20-foot cedar table with 8 high-backed Queen Anne chairs and 2 brass lamps with opal glass shades. In the four corners, worn brown leather armchairs, each with a small side table and a brass floor lamp. On the shelves, books. 4,200 volumes according to the handwritten register that Dorwin took from a drawer in the central table and handed to Des without comment. The register was bound in brown leather, written in sepia ink in 6 different hands over the years. The first entry was dated 1873. The last entry was February 4th, 2015. But Iverson Ogilvy had died in 2006. Des pointed to the date with her index finger. Mr. Barnett, Mr. Ogilvy died in 2006, and this entry is from 2015. Yes, ma'am. Who wrote it? I did, ma'am. You. Mr. Ogilvy taught me the calligraphy. He left standing instructions to continue the register for any books that came in after him. The judge, your husband, sent 1 or 2 books a year by courier from Richmond or Roanoke with instructions to catalog them according to Mr. Ogilvy's system until 2015. Then he stopped. Didn't send any more. I didn't ask why. Des ran her finger along the spines of the books on the second shelf at her chest height. Brown leather, red leather, green leather, marbled paper. Gold titles fading. First editions of American history, colonial charters, mining law, natural philosophy. She did quick arithmetic. 4,200 volumes. If the 19th century American history section alone averaged what she had read in a Richmond Times-Dispatch article last year about antiquarian book auctions, somewhere between $1,000 and $20,000 per volume, the library was worth more than 10 times the debt her husband had left behind. 10 times, perhaps more. She turned from the shelves and sat down at the central table in one of the Queen Anne chairs. Dorwin stood 3 meters away with his hat between his hands, waiting. The cinnamon dog lay down at the foot of Des's chair without being asked. Mr. Barnett, ma'am, you said the judge cried. Dorwin adjusted the hat between his hands. I said he cried twice in this library, ma'am. Once the first day reading some letters from a drawer in that table. Once the second day standing in front of the north wall looking at the spines. I saw him from the corridor, didn't intrude, didn't tell him I saw. He didn't tell me why. Des waited. Dorwin continued slower now. After the second time, he wiped his face with a white handkerchief folded in 4 from his vest pocket. He always carried one of those. Then he closed the drawer. Then he walked out to the courtyard, stood beside the fountain, and smoked a cigarette. I had never seen him smoke before that day, and I never saw him smoke after. Just that once. A man like that, ma'am, crying alone in a library of 4,000 books. He had a reason. I don't know what it was, but I tell you what I saw in case it serves you. Des looked at the register. She closed it, slowly placed it on the table, and asked Dorwin to take her to the night study. The night study was small, 13 feet by 11. A north-facing window looked onto the service courtyard and the ridge behind. A dark mahogany writing desk with a curved top, 2 drawers on the right, and 1 long center drawer. A dark brown cured leather chair with a high back, a Moorish brass candelabrum on the desk with a paraffin candle half consumed, a small hand-woven Appalachian rug in faded garnet beneath the chair, and on the floor against the wall, perfectly aligned four cardboard archive boxes, cream-colored with handwritten labels on the spines in the same old fountain pen hand as the sealed envelope in sepia ink. Box 1 Family Correspondence, 1873 to 1929. Box 2 Family Correspondence, 1930 to 1971. Box 3 Family Correspondence, 1972 to 2006. Box 4 Succession Documents and Pending Letters, 1992 to 2015. 1972. Des knelt on the garnet rug. Dorwin stepped aside without a word and stood in the hallway doorway. The dog stayed with him. She lifted the lid of Box 3. Inside, separated by cardboard dividers organized by year, were 132 onion skin paper folders tied with color-coded cotton ribbons. The top folder, the first one, read on its tab 1972 first half. Correspondence between Iverson Ogilvy and the parents of the nephew Yancey Ellsworth's bride. Before and during the arrangement of the marriage engagement. Arrangement. Des read the tab once. Read it twice. She ran her finger along the edge of the heavy cardboard. The folder was 1.5 inches thick. Inside, she estimated by sight between 50 and 70 letters. And her body knew before the thought formed with a precision that was cold and immediate and did not require reasoning that her marriage was not what she had believed it was. The word arrangement, written by the hand of a cultured small-town gentleman, meant something that the brides of 1972 were never told. She did not open the folder. She closed Box 3, stood up slowly holding the edge of the writing desk, left the night study, said to Dorwin at the gate, "I will be back next week," to read. "The house will be ready, ma'am. I have a small room prepared in the north lateral wing if you wish. A small room with a bed, a bathroom, and a writing desk. Mr. Ogilvy kept it ready for guests. It is clean." "How long has it been prepared?" 19 years, ma'am. I clean it twice a month." For whom? Dorwin thought. "For whoever came with a deed, ma'am. Mr. Ogilvy left instructions that the house should always have a room ready in case someone arrived with the legal right to enter." The following Saturday, Des was not the only one who arrived. Kinsey Ellsworth pulled up in his red pickup at 9:15 in the morning with Nesbitt Elswick, a real estate attorney from Roanoke, and a property appraiser carrying a measuring wheel and a clipboard. Kinsey had obtained a copy of the deed from the county clerk's office. Dorwin opened the gate because they presented legal documents. Kinsey walked through the main courtyard with the stride of a man pricing everything he touched. He photographed the fountain. He photographed the arcades. He stood in the center of the courtyard and said loud enough for Dorwin to hear, "$2 million easy if we sell the land. The house is a teardown, but the lot is gold." Nesbitt Elswick asked Dorwin about the maintenance history, who paid the caretaker's salary, whether there was a lease agreement. Dorwin said one thing. "The house has a legal heir, sir. She was here Thursday." Kinsey turned. "Des Day came here." Dorwin did not answer. Kinsey pulled out his phone and called Furman Osborne right there in the courtyard. Osborne confirmed that Desi Belcher Ellsworth was the sole universal heir under Judge Ellsworth's will. Kinsey hung up. His face had not changed expression, but his voice rose half a register. "She is a seamstress, Furman. She embroiders tablecloths. She doesn't know the first thing about property. That house will rot in her hands." 20 minutes later, Des arrived. Bryn Honecker had called her the previous evening. Nesbitt Elswick had accidentally copied Bryn on an email to Kinsey scheduling the Silver Ridge visit. Bryn told Des to get there. Des caught the early bus. She walked through the open gate and saw three men standing beside the dry fountain. Kinsey turned, smoothing his voice back down to its usual polish. "Morning, Des. Just getting an appraisal for the estate records. Nothing official." Des stood at the entrance of the North Arcade. The manila envelope was in her left hand. Her right hand hung at her side still. She spoke in a low voice, steady without a tremor. "Kinsey, you do not have a deed. I have a deed. You have a copy from the county clerk, which gives you the right to look, but not the right to bring people into my house without my permission." Nesbitt Ellswick opened his mouth to speak. "Sir, I do not know who you are, but this property is in probate transfer to me as universal heir. If you have a legal objection, file it with the court, but today you leave." Kinsey looked at her. He looked at her the way you look at someone you are seeing clearly for the first time. Then he said Yancey would have wanted. "Yancey is dead, Kinsey. What he wanted died with him. What remains is mine." The three men walked out through the gate. Dorwin closed it behind them without a word. Des stood alone in the courtyard for the first time. She looked up at the sky through the four walls of stone and arcade, the June sky of Silver Ridge slightly gray with forest moisture. And she realized something. This was the first time in her life she had said the word mine about a property. For 54 years, the house on Maple Hill had always been Yancey's house. Just now, she had said my house to three strange men in a courtyard she had entered for the first time 6 days ago. That afternoon, after Kinsey had gone, after the courtyard was quiet again, another knock came at the gate. Sabine Barnett, 38, Dorwin's only daughter, a nurse at the county hospital. Dark hair pulled back, hospital scrubs under a fleece jacket. Eyes that were her father's eyes, light brown honey. She had come because Kinsey Ellsworth had posted on Facebook that morning about a historic property in Silver Ridge, maintained by a mysterious caretaker for 30 years. Sabine had read the post. She had recognized the description. She had driven straight from her shift. She found her father in the kitchen of the West Wing where Dorwin was heating water for Des's tea. Des was sitting at the small cedar table, still wearing her shawl. Sabine did not greet Des. She looked at her father. "Daddy, Mama died in 2018, not knowing what you did every day for 33 years. She thought you worked maintenance at the old mine office. She thought that is where the paycheck came from. She died believing that." Dorwin held his hat between his hands. He looked at the kitchen floor. "She deserved to know, Daddy. She deserved to know where you went every morning and why you came home smelling like cedar polish and old books." Dorwin spoke slowly. "Your mama deserved to know. But the judge asked me not to tell, and I gave my word. Your word to a dead man's dead nephew matters more than the truth to your living wife. It was not about maturing more, Sabine. It was about a promise. Your mama understood promises. She would not have wanted me to break one." Sabine cried, not loudly. The way nurses cry silently, quickly wiped with the back of the hand. Then she looked at Des. "Ma'am, I don't know who you are, but my father gave this house 33 years of his life, and my mother never knew." Des said, "Your father is an honest man, Sabine. The house knows that. I am just learning it." Sabine looked at her father, looked at Des, and left. Dorwin sat down at the kitchen table. He placed his hat on the table and did not speak for 5 minutes. Then he said something Des had not expected. It was the most words she had heard him speak at once. "Mrs. Ellsworth, in 2018, when Vanita died, the judge came to the funeral, stood in the back row. Nobody recognized him. After the service, he came to my house, handed me an envelope. 3 months of bonus pay unasked for. Said Mrs. Barnett deserved better than what I asked you to keep from her. Then he left. I didn't open the envelope for 2 weeks. Inside was the money and a handwritten note. It said, 'I know you kept your word. I am sorry I asked you to keep it.'" Des sat with this for a long time. She did not comment. But the information rearranged something small in the picture she was building of her husband. Yancey was not a man who could not feel. He was a man who knew exactly what he had done wrong and could not find a way to fix it except by writing checks and apologies on paper. Two men, she thought, her husband and Dorwin, keeping the same secret for 19 years, one paying to keep it, one being paid to keep it, both paying a different price. One lost the ability to tell the truth to his wife. The other lost his wife entirely without ever being allowed to tell her where he spent his days. She wondered which was heavier. That night, back home on Maple Hill, with the sealed envelope still on the dining room table and the embroidery frame back on the buffet with the ivory spool beside it, the phone rang. It was Tressa, not on the regular schedule, 2 days early. "Mom, is it true?" Des sat down. "Is what true, Tressa?" "Kinsey called me. He said Dad had another house. A big one. That he hid. He said you know about it. He said you're trying to keep it from the family." 3 seconds of silence. "It is true that your father had another house. It is true that I know about it. I found out 3 weeks ago. It is not true that I am keeping anything from anyone." "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I just found out myself. Kinsey says Dad promised him the land." "Kinsey is lying." "Are you sure?" "I am sure." Tressa was quiet. A long quiet. Then in a different voice, smaller, "Mom, are you okay?" "I am okay, Tressa. Do you need me to come?" Des thought carefully. The way she had thought about Moselle's question. The way she had thought about whether to open the sealed envelope. "Not yet, but I will. When I am ready, I will call." "Promise me." "I promise." She hung up, sat in the dining room. The pendulum clock on the wall was completely still. Now had been still for days. No ticking, no chime, no last impossible sound from an unwound spring. The house on Maple Hill was quieter than it had ever been. But the other house, the one 45 minutes up the mountain, Des could still hear it. She had been hearing it since the first night. The cedar beams settling, the moisture in the stone walls breathing, the echo waiting in the entrance hall for the next footstep. She decided, Monday, June 22nd, she would open the envelope in the night study. On Sunday evening, she sat in the dining room with the sealed envelope in front of her and the embroidery frame on the buffet behind her and the ivory spool of thread beside it. She picked up the envelope, held it in both hands, ran her thumb along the edge of the wax one more time. The wax was still perfectly intact. 34 years of patience waiting to be broken by the right thumbnail at the right hour. She placed the envelope in the inside pocket of her gray shawl. Monday morning, June 22nd, 2026. She dressed, descended the cobblestone slope, boarded the bus. At 11:04, she stepped off in front of Ogilvy House, 14 Miners Row. She knocked 3 times on the brass fist. Dorwin opened the gate. "Good morning, ma'am." "Good morning, Mr. Barnett." A pause. Then Dorwin said something that made Des stop mid-step. "You brought the letter." It was not a question. It was a recognition. "How do you know about the letter, Mr. Barnett?" "Mr. Ogilvy told me, ma'am. In 1992. He said that when the heir came with a red wax letter in her pocket, I should open the gate without asking anything. I did not know if anyone would ever come. But those were the instructions." Des looked at him. Dorwin looked back with the eyes of a man who had waited 34 years for a sentence to complete itself. She stepped through the gate, and behind her Dorwin closed it, and the echo of the iron latch dropping into its cradle traveled through the entrance hall and up the stone stairs and along the cedar-paneled corridor and into the night study, where 4 boxes sat on a faded garnet rug, waiting as they had been waiting for 19 years for someone to kneel down and begin to read. The night study was ready. Dorwin had placed fresh candles in the Moorish brass candelabrum. A cup of chamomile tea sat on the desk beside a small pot of hot water. The standing lamp in the corner was lit casting a warm circle on the mahogany surface. The 4 archive boxes were on the rug exactly where Des had left them 11 days earlier. Nothing had been moved. Nothing had been opened. The room smelled of beeswax and old cedar and the faint mineral tang of morning dew evaporating off the stone walls. Des sat in the leather chair behind the writing desk. She took the sealed envelope from the inside pocket of her shawl and placed it on the mahogany. Cream-colored onion skin paper, dark red wax seal with the I and O crest, faded sepia ink to whoever inherits this house. She looked at it for exactly 1 minute and 17 seconds. Then she positioned the nail of her right thumb beneath the lower edge of the wax and began to press upward. 5 descending notes filled the house. Dutila Sol Fa, a mechanical doorbell, brass and spring, installed in 1923, maintained for 103 years without failure. The notes traveled through all 4 wings of the manor, rising through stairwells and corridors and into the small north-facing room where Des sat with her thumb against a wax seal that had waited 34 years to be broken. She lifted her nail. The wax held. She became very still. The candle flame wavered once from a draft beneath the unvarnished door, then steadied. Below in the entrance hall, boot steps crossed the herringbone tile toward the gate. Des waited. She placed a white handkerchief folded in 4 over the envelope. The handkerchief covered the wax not completely, but enough that whoever entered the room would not see it immediately. The envelope was between her and Iverson. Whatever was at the gate was something new. Both things would meet in this room, but not at the same time. Dorwin's steps returned. 2 soft knocks on the door frame. "Come in, Mr. Barnett." Dorwin entered, hat between his hands. "Ma'am, there is a young woman at the gate, Wren Quillen, early 30s, says she is a doctoral student in history at the University of Virginia. She is looking for the Ogilvy archive. Says Mr. Ogilvy appears in a footnote in a book from 1987 by a Dr. Lemuel Carruthers. She is asking if the archive still exists." Des looked at him. "In 33 years, Mr. Barnett, has anyone come looking for this archive?" "No, ma'am, never. And today she comes." "Today, ma'am, the day you were going to open the letter." Des ran her finger once along the right edge of the mahogany desk, slowly left to right. Then she said, "Let her in, but ask her first if she has time to stay a while. Not a short while. A while, if she is in a hurry, tell her to come back another day. If she is not in a hurry, let her in. I am not receiving anyone in a hurry today." Dorwin went down. He returned 4 minutes later, followed by a woman of 32 or 33 medium height, tending short, dark brown hair, pulled back in a tight ponytail, thick black rectangular glasses, a green olive waterproof jacket, a green olive cloth, backpack, jeans, brown hiking boots, and a hardcover notebook held against her chest with both hands. A red lanyard around her neck held a faculty credential. UV, a graduate history, Wren Quillen, PhD, candidate class 2024 to 2029. Dorwin showed her to the only other chair in the room, a walnut chair with a woven palm seat that he had placed near the desk. Wren sat. She put the backpack on the floor and the notebook on her knees and adjusted her glasses, pushing them 1 millimeter higher on the bridge of her nose with a single finger. It was the gesture of someone who was not looking at the house with a visitor's eyes. It was the gesture of someone who had studied black and white photographs of houses like this one in archive rooms in Charlottesville for 3 years and had never been inside one. Des spoke first. "Tell me what you are looking for, miss." "Wren." "Ma'am, if you will allow me." "Wren, tell me what you are looking for." Wren opened the hardcover notebook, turned 3 pages, found a page of pencil notes with a small photocopied page stapled to it. She placed the photocopy carefully on the desk in front of the white handkerchief without bringing it near the covered envelope. It was page 217 of a book, chapter heading, Private Custodians and Dispersed Archives, The Case of Mining Families in the Silver Ridge District, 1870 to 1920. Author Lemuel Carruthers. Publisher University of Virginia Press, 1987. Edition of 200 copies. And in the body text a sentence underlined in pencil by Wren. The archive of the Ogilvy family, currently in the custody of Mr. Iverson Ogilvy at his private residence in Silver Ridge, Virginia, contains pieces of mercantile, testamentary, and private correspondence of exceptional value for the reconstruction of the social and economic networks of provincial mining families between 1873 and 1929, preserved in optimal conditions and in rigorous chronological order. Read the underlined sentence. Read it twice, then looked at Wren. What exactly are you looking for in that archive, Wren? Ma'am, my doctoral thesis is titled Women of the Provinces and Strategic Marriages in the Mining Networks of Appalachian, Virginia, 1870 to 1950. I study how marriages were arranged between mining family dynasties and urban professional families, how dowries were negotiated, how family debts were settled through marriage alliances, how the women in those marriages function as invisible financial bridges between estates. It is a topic with very little documentation. The private letters from those arrangements are almost never preserved because the families burn them when the matriarchs die. That is why when I found the mention of the Ogilvy archive in Carruthers' book, I came to verify whether it still exists. Des did not move. She did not breathe differently. She did not shift the hand that rested on the white handkerchief covering the sealed envelope. But inside, in a place that was not the mind and not the stomach, but somewhere between the two, a small thing clicked into place. The way a drawer slides home on well-oiled runners. Box 3 on the floor. The top folder. 1972. Arrangement of the nephew's marriage. Wren had said 1870 to 1950. The 1972 folder fell outside her thesis by 22 years. But the machinery, Wren described private letters, dowries, family debts, settled through marriage alliances, women as invisible financial bridges was the same machinery. Only the decades were different. Des made her decision. Wren, I am going to offer you something. Listen first, then you decide. Yes, ma'am. This house has 4 boxes of family correspondence. The first 2 cover 1873 to 1971. The third covers 1972 to 2006. The fourth has succession documents and pending letters from 1992. I will open boxes 1 and 2 for you, for your thesis, for your time period, for what you came to find. Box 3 I will not open. Box 4 either. Both stay with me until I decide what to do with them. Does that work for you professionally? Wren nodded slowly. It works perfectly, ma'am. Boxes 1 and 2 are more than I dared hope for. With those 2, I have material for 3 dissertations, not 1. Good, but I have one more thing to ask you. Go ahead. Wren in the old mining families, when a marriage was arranged, who knew and who did not? Wren took a breath. She adjusted her glasses. She answered the way a doctoral candidate answers when she has read 872 academic articles on the subject and knows the answer from memory, but speaks carefully because the person asking is not a dissertation committee, but a 73-year-old woman with a sealed envelope beneath a white handkerchief. In the classic pattern, the parents on both sides knew. The unmarried uncles with money knew. The older brothers, sometimes the trusted clergy. The brides almost never. The grooms sometimes not. What the grooms usually knew was what it suited them to know. Whether the dowry was real, whether the expected inheritance was certain, whether the profession placed them well in the network. What the grooms did not know usually was exactly why their parents had chosen that particular bride and not another, and what specific debts were being canceled by the wedding. The brides, ma'am. In general, the brides knew nothing. They knew they were going to marry a young man from such and such a family on such and such a date, and that his family was good. That was what they knew. And when did the brides find out in general? Almost never, ma'am. Almost never. Almost never. The ones who did find out, it was by accident. A letter found after someone died. A comment dropped by a drunk brother-in-law at a nephew's wedding. Archives like this one opened decades later by widows who sat down to read. Wren held Dez's gaze. Neither woman looked away. "See you Wednesday, Wren, 9 in the morning. Mr. Barnett will open the gate. The library will be ready. I will be here." "Yes, ma'am, thank you." "And Wren, before you go, one thing." "Ma'am, I do not know what is under that handkerchief, and I do not want to know. But I will tell you something before I leave. Whatever it is, open it slowly. Things stored for a long time, when they come out in their own order. Let them come out in their order, not in yours." "Thank you, Wren." Wren stood, closed the notebook, slung the backpack over her right shoulder. Dorwin rose from the stone bench in the corner where he had been sitting and walked her out. The door closed behind them. Their footsteps receded down the narrow hallway, down the service stairs, across the main courtyard. Des heard it all from above because the arches carried sound, the way cupped hands carry water. Then the exterior gate opened and closed, and Wren Quillen walked down Miners Row with her notebook in her backpack and her glasses slightly fogged from the cold mountain air at 11:50 in the morning. Dorwin came back up. 2 slow knocks. "Come in, Mr. Barnett." Dorwin entered. He stood in the doorway with his hat between his hands. The cinnamon dog entered behind him and settled at the foot of the stone bench in the corner. "Ma'am, there is one more thing Mr. Ogilvy told me. In 1992, Des looked at him. "Mr. Ogilvy told me that on the day the heir arrived with the red wax letter in her pocket, and on the day a young woman arrived with a hardcover notebook pressed to her chest, if that day happened to be the same day, I should tell the heir one thing before she opened the letter." He paused. "He said the letter should not be read alone. It should be read with someone present. Not me, ma'am. I am the caretaker. With someone. Anyone but someone. Even if that someone does not read. Even if that someone does not know what is being read. Even if that someone is just someone sitting in the corner." He made me repeat it to him twice, word for word. Des looked at the caretaker for a long time. "Mr. Barnett, stay. Sit on the stone bench. Close your eyes if you want, but stay in this room." Dorwin sat. He placed his hat beside him on the bench. He closed his eyes, not completely, but nearly so, the way a man remains present without intruding. The dog rested its chin on his left boot. "Here I am, ma'am." Des lifted the white handkerchief, folded it again, now into 8, placed it to the left of the desk. The sealed envelope lay alone on the mahogany. She brought the candelabrum closer, not to heat the wax, but to have better light on the paper when she read. The candle burned with a quiet yellow flame. She slid the nail of her right thumb beneath the wax seal. Slowly. The wax released in a single piece with a small dry crack, cleaned the sound of something that had waited a very long time to be opened, and finally gave way without resistance. The wax piece remained attached to the envelope by one edge. Des left it that way. Old things are opened without discarding parts. She lifted the flap. Inside were 4 sheets. 4 sheets of onion skin paper, cream, colored darker than the envelope, slightly yellowed at the edges, folded in 3 precise horizontal folds. Each sheet, when unfolded, bore in the upper left corner a small, blind, embossed monogram The I and O crossed, and beneath it in sepia ink, a date and place. The first sheet read, Silver Ridge, Virginia, June 17th, 1992, one day before the will. Des put on her reading glasses, the small ones, tortoiseshell frames, bought in 1989, which now slid to the tip of her nose because the nose had changed in 37 years. And she began to read. The letter began, to whoever inherits this house. If you are reading this, two things are certain. I am dead, and my nephew Yancey Ellsworth is also dead. If it were he reading this, this letter would not exist. I would have delivered it to him in person in March of 2007, or whenever he received the succession along with verbal instructions about the house. I would have burned it afterward. But you are not Yancey. If you are reading this letter, it is because Yancey kept it sealed his entire life, and upon his death it passed to you. That means Yancey decided at some point between March 2007 and the day of his death not to open this envelope. I respect that decision of his, and I ask you, whoever you are, to respect now the decision I am about to explain, which is not his but mine, and which applies from the moment you finish reading this letter until the day you die or decide otherwise. This letter has 4 sheets. Read them in order. Do not skip. The first sheet is to introduce myself. My name is Iverson Ogilvy. I was born in this house on March 4th, 1924. Only son of Bernice Ogilvy, attorney for the Silver Ridge Mining Company, and Bertine Ogilvy, only daughter of old Corwin Ogilvy, owner of the Hardscrabble Mine, and 3 others in the Ridge. My mother died of scarlet fever in 1929 when I was 5. My father died in 1947 of a heart attack, sitting in the cured leather chair that, if the house has not been rearranged, is still in the same study where you are reading this letter. I inherited the house, the library, the archive, and nothing else at 23. The mines had not belonged to the family since 1934, when my grandfather Corwin sold them to the miners' cooperative to pay debts my father never fully explained. I never married. I had no children. I lived in this house for 68 years with 2 successive caretakers. If Dorwin Barnett is still the caretaker on the day you read this, give him my regards from the other side, because by then I will be dead, but still grateful. Des raised her eyes from the paper. Mr. Barnett, Mr. Ogilvy sends his regards. Dorwin opened his eyes part way. Receive, ma'am. Tell him when it is your turn to speak with him that we are still here, that the house is clean, the lemon trees are pruned, the books have no dust, and the heir arrived. Des lowered her eyes and continued. The second sheet said on the house, this house, in the strict sense of patrimony, is worth more for what it contains than for what it is. The house itself is a provincial manor. The library, the stonework, the walnut floors, the cedar beams, the fountain, the crest. These are fine things, yes, but not extraordinary for their era. What is extraordinary is the archive. The Ogilvy archive covers a century and a half of the mining network of the Silver Ridge District and contains pieces of correspondence that, if properly custodied, would serve as irreplaceable primary source material for any serious historian of American mining, of provincial family networks in the 19th and 20th centuries, and most importantly to me, of the social economy of the women who sustained those marriages without knowing what they sustained. This last part, that last part is what matters most to me and what should matter most to you, whoever you are. I will explain why in the third sheet. Des turned to the third sheet without raising her eyes. Dorwin stayed quiet in the corner. The dog stayed quiet at his feet. The candle stayed quiet. The light from the north window shifted 1 degree closer to vertical because it was now past noon, and the June sun in Silver Ridge, at that hour begins to fall straight down over courtyards and ridges and houses that listen. The third sheet said, "On the family." My mother, Bertine Ogilvy, married my father, Bernice Ogilvy, in 1922 by arrangement between my grandfather, Corwin, and a family of attorneys in Roanoke. My mother was 18. My father was 31. My mother's dowry included this house, the furnishings, the library as it stood in 1922, and a minority stake in the hardscrabble mine, which was later lost. My mother never read the letters that passed between grandfather Corwin and my father's parents in the months before the wedding. Those letters are in box 1 of the archive folder 1921 and 1922. No lock. Whoever reads them will understand that my mother was married to cancel a mercantile debt owed by my father to grandfather Corwin in an amount equivalent to $35,000 in 1921 currency. My mother never knew. She died at 24, believing my father had chosen her for love at first sight at a church social in Silver Ridge. My father, as far as I was able to reconstruct after his death, did love her. Loved her truly, but the debt existed and the wedding was what it was, and my mother never knew. I found out at 27 in 1951, reading the boxes. And from that day, this house has carried a particular weight for me. Not a weight of rage, a weight of knowing. My nephew Yancey Ellsworth, son of my only half-sister Verlene Ogilvy, Ellsworth received this house in my will for one reason. He was the only living relative with legal standing to receive it, and with my relative confidence that he would not sell it cheaply. I did not love Yancey. I knew him little, watched him grow up from a distance. He was a coal boy, ambitious, efficient, calculating. He had a tendency toward provincial respectability. He lacked the tenderness my mother had, but he had the institutional loyalty of small-town professional men, and in matters of patrimonial custody, that is what is needed. Then the letter said what it said. Yancey married in 1972, a girl from Silver Ridge, daughter of a silver mine blaster killed in a shaft explosion. Her name was Desi Belcher. I was not at the wedding. My half-sister Verlene Yancey's mother did not invite me. Relations between Verlene and me were not good, but I learned of the wedding 2 years later in 1974 through a letter sent to me by Yancey's father, my brother-in-law, Verlin Ellsworth, now deceased, asking me for a loan. In that letter, my brother-in-law, Verlin, explained that the marriage of Yancey to the dead blaster's daughter had been arranged to cancel an economic debt between Verlin and the Belcher family, and that the bride did not know. The bride believed Yancey had fallen in love with her at a Christmas party at Assumption Church in 1971, where they had been introduced by the Absher cousins at a dinner for 18 with ice cream for dessert. Verlin wrote it plainly. The girl does not know, will not know, and should not know, because knowing in the case of women like her serves no purpose except to embitter a life already made. Des stopped reading. She looked at the wall in front of her. 5 oval portrait frames hung in a line at eye height. 4 sepia photographs, Corwin Ogilvy, 1845 to 1929. Bertine Ogilvy, 1904 to 1929. Bernice Ogilvy, 1891 to 1947. Iverson Ogilvy, 1924 to 2006. And a 5th frame, empty glass in place, no photograph inside. She had seen that frame on her first visit. She had not asked Dorwin about it. She had thought it was waiting for someone. Now she knew whose face it was waiting for. What she stopped believing was not that her husband had loved her. Her husband had loved her in his way, cold, ambitious, efficient, institutional, and it had been enough for 54 years. 2 living daughters, 1 dead son, 1,700 tablecloths embroidered, 8,000 dinners prepared, 38 annual holiday parties for visiting attorneys from Roanoke. What she stopped believing was that the choice had been his. The choice had not been his. The debt had chosen. Her marriage had been a transaction, and for 54 years she had been the payment. Her body received this at 12:07 on Monday, June 22nd. Her mind would take days, but the body at 12:07 already knew. She turned to the fourth sheet. It was shorter than the others, 12 lines, same sepia ink, same careful fountain pen hand, no signature at the end, only initials, I.O. What I ask of you, whoever inherits this house, one thing only, that the truth not be spent against the dead. Anger at the dead does not arrive at its destination. It stays circling in the heads of the living and sickens them. The dead, in the case of provincial networks like mine, did what they did because the machinery formed them that way. It does not excuse them, but it explains them. What does arrive at its destination, what does change something, is that what they did not continue to be done, that the letters be preserved, that the widows be able to read them, that the daughters, if you have them, know what network they entered, that the generations that come after, if they come, learn to tell the difference between a marriage and an arrangement and between affection and a debt. This house, this library, this archive do not sell to private buyers. Do not scatter. Deliver at the moment you choose to a serious academic institution with clauses for public use. There is a state university nearby that is the one that would correspond. I spoke with them in my time. They know. They are waiting. If you choose to custodize the archive in your lifetime, custodize it. If you choose to deliver it, deliver it. What you must not do is sell it, scatter it, or silence it. That last part is what I ask. The rest, the pace, the timing, the concrete decisions are yours. I send you, whoever you are, a greeting from 1992 I.O. Des folded the fourth sheet. She folded it carefully in the same 3 horizontal folds in which it had come. She folded the other 3 in reverse order, third first, then second, then first, and put them back into the onion skin envelope, with the wax piece still attached at one edge. She placed the envelope to the left of the candelabrum. Then she asked Doran to bring her one more letter, from Box 3, folder 1974. Red separator, second letter. Dorwin Rose knelt on the garnet rug, opened Box 3, removed the 1972 folders without touching them, found the 1974 folder, opened it at the red separators, extracted the second letter, a single sheet on Ellsworth and Associates letterhead from Roanoke, dated March 18th, 1974, addressed to Mr. Iverson, Ogilvy, Silver Ridge. He closed the folder, returned it to the box, closed the box, and placed the single letter on the mahogany desk in front of Des. She read it, 5 paragraphs, a request for a loan, an explanation of the Ellsworth family's financial circumstances, and the sentence in her father-in-law's handwriting, the man she had served Sunday dinners to for 17 years until he died in 1989. The man who had kissed her on the cheek every Christmas and called her daughter the girl does not know, will not know, and should not know, because knowing in the case of women like her serves no purpose except to embitter a life already made. She read it once, twice, 3 times. On the third reading, she put the letter down, closed her eyes completely, and kept them closed for 6 seconds. She did not cry. What she felt was something hard inside, cold, not hot, like a small stone settling into the place where for 54 years a belief had been. The belief was gone. The stone remained. The stone did not hurt. The stone had weight. That was different. She opened her eyes. She folded the letter from Verlin Ellsworth, placed it in a new envelope from the desk drawer, and wrote in pencil on the front, June 2026. First reading, reread. She put the new envelope in the first right-hand drawer of the mahogany desk beneath a blank notepad. 2 days later, on Wednesday, June 24th, Des returned to Ogilvy House. Ren Quillen was already there working in the library with box one open on the central cedar table, her notebook beside her copying passages in pencil, with the focused quiet of a woman who understood that the papers she was touching had been waiting 80 years to be read by someone who would treat them as evidence rather than curiosity. Des went to the night study. She had been there 20 minutes when Dorwin came to the door. "Ma'am, there is someone else at the gate." "Who?" "Judge Arvell Deal, from Roanoke. He is alone, no attorney with him. He brought a bottle of bourbon and an envelope." Arvell Deal was 71 years old, retired county judge. He and Yancey had been classmates at Washington and Lee. He and Yancey had practiced in adjacent offices in Roanoke for 15 years before Deal was appointed to the bench. He had come to every Ellsworth holiday party from 1978 to 2019. He had shaken Des's hand and complimented her tablecloths and eaten her roast and drunk Yancey's whiskey 42 times. And he had known. Des received him in the main courtyard beside the dry fountain. She did not invite him inside. She did not offer him tea. She stood on one side of the fountain and Deal stood on the other, and the June sun fell nearly straight down between them. Deal spoke first. "Des, I heard about this place from Kinsey, and I came because there is something I should have told you 50 years ago." He held out the envelope. Inside was a carbon copy of Verlin Ellsworth's 1974 letter, the same letter Des had read 2 days earlier. But this copy had a handwritten note in the margin in Verlin's writing, "Arvell, keep this between us. The arrangement is done, no reason to revisit." Deal had kept this carbon copy for 50 years, in a locked drawer in his judicial chambers. Then in a locked drawer at home after his retirement, 50 years. "I knew Des. I knew since 1974. Yancey knew I knew. We never spoke about it, not once in 50 years. That is how things worked in small town practice. You do not revisit arrangements. You let them settle. You move on. You tell yourself it is not your business. And then 40 years pass, and the woman who was the arrangement is standing in front of you in a courtyard, and you realize it was always your business, and you were a coward." Des let him finish. She watched his face the whole time. Deal was not performing. He was not posturing. He was standing in the sun beside a dry fountain in a house he had never visited, holding a bottle of bourbon he had not opened, telling a truth that was half a century overdue. His hands were not steady. His voice was not steady, but he was there. "Des," said Arvell, "did you ever look at me across the dinner table at one of Yancey's Bar Association parties and think that woman does not know she was the payment?" Deal did not answer immediately. Then every time, "Des, every single time. And you said nothing, and I said nothing." The fountain between them was dry. The cherub on the upper tier looked out at nothing with blank stone eyes. Somewhere in the west wing, faintly a page turned, Wren in the library reading letters from 1873. Iverson Ogilvy wrote something in a letter Day said. He wrote, "Anger at the dead does not arrive at its destination. But you are not dead, Arvell. You are standing right here." Deal set the bottle of bourbon on the rim of the fountain. He did not open it. He placed the envelope beside it. "I know, Des, that is why I came. Not for forgiveness. I do not expect that. I came so you would know that I knew, and that I knew for 50 years, and that the silence was mine too, not just Yancey's." Des stood in the courtyard. The light fell on the bluestone and on the clay pots and on the water stain at the center of the fountain where water had not flowed in decades. She looked at Deal for a long time, then she spoke. "I am not going to forgive you today, Arvell. I may not forgive you ever. but I am not going to spend the truth against you either. You can go." Deal nodded. He walked through the interior gate, down the corridor, through the entrance hall, and out the exterior gate. His car started on the street below. The engine faded down Miner's Row. The bottle of bourbon and the envelope sat on the fountain rim. Des looked at them. "Mr. Barnett put that in the kitchen. We will open it someday. Not today." Dorwin picked up the bottle. "Yes, ma'am. Not today." That afternoon, Des sat in the night study and made 3 decisions. The first, she would write to Tressa in Savannah and to Vashti in Edinburgh. Not a letter telling the truth. Not yet. A letter inviting them home. "There is something I need to tell you both. It is not urgent, but it is important. Come when you can." The second, she would speak with Wren about the UVA Custodial Archive Program for Boxes 1 and 2. The letters would go to the university under Dez's ownership with restricted academic access, no commercial reproduction, and Dez's right to withdraw any part at any time. Box 3 would stay with Des. Box 4 would stay with Des. When she was ready, she would decide what happened to them. The third, Kinsey's probate challenge. Bryn Honecker had said the filing was legally weak and would likely be dismissed. But Des told her on the phone that evening, "Do not fight him by attacking him. Fight him with the deed. The deed says enough." At 1:30, Days and Dorwin ate lunch together in the kitchen of the North Lateral Wing. Mushroom broth from the Ridge, cornbread from the bakery down the street, drip coffee in 2 chip blue enamel mugs. They sat across from each other at the small cedar table with the red and white checkered cloth, and they ate in silence without speaking the way 2 people eat who have been through something together and do not need to name it yet. After lunch, before leaving, Des walked back up to the night study. She stood in front of the 5 oval portrait frames on the stone wall, 4 faces looking out from the past, 1 empty frame waiting. She reached into her wallet and took out an old photograph, black and white, a wallet-sized portrait slightly bent at one corner. A young woman of 1972, looking directly at the camera with small hazel eyes and dark hair and a mouth that was not smiling but was not unhappy. The employee identification photo from Hope Stationery, the office supply store on Main Street in Silver Ridge, where Desi Belcher had worked behind the counter before she became Desi Ellsworth. She did not place the photograph inside the frame. She leaned it against the glass, resting on the lower edge of the frame so that it stood upright but was not locked in. It could fall, but today it stood. She looked at the girl in the photograph, and the girl looked back at her, and between them were 54 years and a white handkerchief folded in the foregreen and a stone that had settled where a belief used to be. The girl did not know what was coming. The woman knew what had come, and neither of them was angry. Des turned from the wall. She walked to the mahogany desk one last time. She placed her right hand flat on the surface, all 5 fingers spread, and held it there. The mahogany was smooth and cool, and the grain was barely perceptible under the pads of her fingers. 54 years of embroidering had given her hands an understanding of good wood that did not require thought. This was good wood. The desk where Iverson Ogilvy had written 4 sheets of onion skin to someone he could not have known would be a 73-year-old woman, daughter of a dead blaster married by economic accident to a nephew Iverson had never fully trusted. The desk where Des had learned the truth of her marriage and had decided in the same afternoon that the truth would not be wasted on the dead. Because anger at the dead does not arrive. Iverson had written it, and Iverson had been right. But what Des understood now, standing in the night study with her hand on the mahogany and the candle guttering low in the Moorish candelabrum, was that the anger was already becoming something else, something that did arrive. something that had a destination and a purpose and a pace that was hers to set. The letters to Teresa and Vashti would go out this week. Wren would return on Wednesday. The custodial agreement with UVA would take months to negotiate, and Des intended to be present for every clause. The house on Maple Hill, mortgaged to the last cent, would be dealt with in its own time. There was an embroidery frame on a buffet cabinet with the spool of ivory thread beside it waiting. There was a room in the north lateral wing of Ogilvy House cleaned twice a month for 19 years, where Des would begin spending 3 days a week reading the boxes one letter at a time in their own order, at her own pace. There was a prayer she intended to say at the English Minor Cemetery on a Sunday in October, with Moselle Yates beside her for a father she barely remembered, and a son she would never forget, and a husband she was only now beginning to know. And there was a frame on the wall with a photograph leaning against the glass. A girl of 19 who did not know she was a payment. A woman of 73 who knew and who had chosen what to do with the knowing. Des lifted her hand from the desk. She blew out the candle. She walked out of the night study and closed the door behind her. She descended the service stairs. She crossed the main courtyard where the dry fountain stood in the full noon sun and the lemon trees cast short round shadows on the tiles. And somewhere in the west wing, Wren Quillet was reading letters from 1873 in a library of 4,200 volumes, with the focused devotion of a woman who knew that every page she turned was a page someone had once written by candlelight, hoping it would be read. Dorwin Barnett met her at the gate. He opened one panel. The brass knocker swung slightly as the iron moved. The cinnamon dog stood beside him, ears forward, watching her go. "I will be back Monday, Mr. Barnett." "The house will be ready, ma'am." "Mr. Barnett." "Ma'am, thank you for staying in the room." Dorwin held his hat with both hands. The creases at the corners of his honey-colored eyes deepened. Mr. Ogilvy said, accompanied. "I just did what he asked." Des stepped through the gate. She heard it close behind her, the iron latch dropping into its cradle, the sound traveling back through the entrance hall and up the stone stairs and along the corridors and into the rooms where the boxes waited and the books waited and the empty frame waited. Patient, still listening. She walked down Miners Row slowly in the early afternoon light, holding nothing against her shawl, because the manila envelope was no longer needed, and the sealed letter was no longer sealed, and the truth was no longer hidden. She walked with her hands free for the first time in months. The mountain air moved through the hemlocks above the street and carried with it the sound of something she could not identify. At first, a sound she had not heard in a very long time, and then she recognized it. It was the sound of her own footsteps on cobblestone, unhurried, unaccompanied, going not away from something, but towards something at a pace she had chosen on a road she would walk again.